everyone, or as I would say in Austria, good evening. It's almost 10 p.m. Here. This is why lights are on in the background. I'm going to get right into the presentation, and I'm going to be starting first of all with what we're going to be talking about today, and I'm also going to do a quick introduction of myself. So the plan for today is that I'm going to be introducing you to our vision, where we actually come from here at Runtastic, how we actually learn to understand our metrics, so a bit more like the theoretical part and framework, how we approach retention rate optimization and what we do there. And then the last point will actually be some actions that we took and also some insights on how this improved our retention rates and different performance KPIs. And at the very end, I'm going to do a short ramp up with some main takeaways. As the whole session is actually virtually, I thought I'm also going to tell you a little bit about myself. So as you already heard in the introduction, I'm the head of product marketing for the Adidas training app. I'm currently streaming live from my best friend's living room because I'm on vacation and I'm visiting her. So this is what I'm doing right now. I recently rediscovered and got re-addicted to some sort of like classic games, like the really old ones from the 90s. And I'm a total sneakerhead. So much about me. And I'm going to be kicking off the session now with this slide about our vision. So some of you might know that we at Runtastic are for more than 5 years now a very proud member of the Adidas family, and we are united with Adidas by one shared vision. And that one is that through sport, we have the power to change lives by engaging and empowering 1 billion connected athletes. So we do truly believe that we have the power to change people's lives through sports, but to actually do so, we first need to get them into sports. And this is exactly our part at Runtastic and what we're aiming for with our apps. We want to get people into sports and constantly engage them to keep them. And this also sets us in a very unique position because our main metric is actually a non-revenue metric. So what we're focusing on is driving company goals that are mainly not related to revenue generation, but I'm going to be sharing a bit more on that also in the upcoming slides. So to get started with, like, why am I talking about retention rate optimization today? It's because we're currently seeing a more than 125% year-over-year growth in our MAUs. So what we experienced in the last year was that we actually lowered our user acquisition budgets, but nonetheless, we were actually able to significantly grow our MAU base on a year-over-year basis. And the question might pop up for you, how we actually did that. And this is exactly what today's session is going to be about. How did we get to that growth number and what did we actually do to get there? So first of all, it was really important for us to understand our metrics and to build a framework that everyone in the company can actually work with. And that framework is actually starting with the company goal at the very top of it. Then we looked into metrics that are correlating with the company goal because simply speaking, the company goal is pretty top level and not so tangible for our teams to work on. So the next level for us would be the driver metric. But often also the driver metric is still not tangible enough for teams to really like wrap their heads around it, come up with ideas and really optimize the metrics and even own them. So this is why we looked also into another level of correlation, and the lowest metric that we are looking at in this hierarchy that you see there is the proxy metric. So this is a metric that aims to be very tangible for our teams to really own it and work with it. And this is really theoretical, so I'm just going to share with you what the actual metrics behind those terms are. If it jumps to the next slide, there we go. Sorry for the inconvenience here. So what we then did next was really looking at the MAU goal, which is our company goal. So MAU is the abbreviation for monthly active users, just so we're all on the same page. And then we looked into the correlation here and what's driving our monthly active users. It's actually user retention. And the first one that we looked into was week 1 retention, because we do believe that we have to start with short-term retention first, bring it to a level that we are satisfied with, and then we can go on to midterm and also long-term retention at some point. And then the proxy metric for week 1 retention for us is the install to activity rate. So we know that the higher the install to activity rate is, the higher week 1 retention will be, and the higher our week 1 retention is, the higher our MAU number will actually be. So With this framework in place, we were actually able to deliver a very actionable, very tangible proxy metric to our teams. And the best thing about it is that our squads are now A, highly motivated, and B, they are working very autonomously. So they are basically owning such metrics independently. They are defining and deriving all the ideas how we can improve them, and they are also then delivering on it. But today's talk is not about week 1 retention optimization, but actually about month 2 retention optimization. So this is actually what we then moved on to. Once we were satisfied with our week 1 retention, we said, okay, there needs to be the next thing. What is the next part that we're going to be looking at? And we also know that our MAUs are driven through month 2 retention rates. So the one thing that was missing for us was the proxy metric again that we could deliver to our teams so that they can independently work on it. And our proxy metric for month 2 retention is that users should be doing 2 workouts or more in their first 14 days. And how did we actually get to this? We teamed up with our most favorite data scientist, who's probably also listening in right now. And he came up with the retention model. And through that retention model and machine learning algorithm behind it, we were actually able to get those insights and have another proxy metric that our squads can actually wrap their heads around, create ideas, and also implement actions then. So to sum it up with, how are we approaching retention rate optimization? It's for us a step-by-step process. So we first start out with short-term retention optimization, which was for us week 1 retention, because our products do have a weekly usage frequency. Now we're moving on to sort of like a midterm retention optimization, because month 2 retention is what we really just optimize on in this moment. So what I'm going to be sharing with you also later on in terms of actions is all very, very fresh. And the next step then for us would be to optimize more and more and more and go into long-term retention rate optimization. And overall, what's also important for us when we speak about retention rate optimization is that we focus on the ideal path. So from the retention model that I introduced a bit earlier already, we know what this ideal path actually should look like. So for us, it starts with the user being signed up. So basically registering in our app, creating an account, and getting onboarded to the app. The next state that we would have is what we call activated, and it's when the user actually experiences the core value proposition of the app for the very first time. So this would be the first activity done from a user. Then we move on to casually engaged state, which is doing 2 activities or more in the first 14 days. All users who are actually getting there and achieving this are for us casually engaged users. And then we would also have core engaged users, but I'm going to be very open and very honest with you. We don't know what a core engaged user is at this point in time. We do have theories about it, of course, but as we approach retention rate optimization as a step-by-step process, we cannot be there yet because we're still focusing on our casually engaged users at the moment and getting more and more users to the state actually. On the other hand, we're not just focusing on this ideal path, but we're also making sure that we're not forgetting about those users who are struggling along the path. And some of you might actually be familiar with this graph because it's called the adjacent user theory and was introduced first by the growth team of Instagram actually. And we can also apply this very well to our framework here. So we do have, again, the different steps that the user signs up, gets activated, casually engaged, and core engaged. And what the adjacent user theory actually tells us is that along this way, there are always successful users. So those who actually make it to the next step, or in that case, to the next circle. And we also have users who are dropping off, and we call them adjacent users because for some reason, they're not making it to the next stage. And what is really important for us is that we don't move on to the next step or to the next opportunity in retention rate optimization if we don't have all our users with us and make sure that there are no hurdles for the users so that they can really like move on and move down that funnel that we are creating here. So to do so, we actually want to continuously gather feedback so that we're not purely focusing on this ideal path that we can shape based on data and all the insights that we're getting from the data team, but we also want to have some qualitative feedback from our users directly that will help us to optimize on a more holistic approach. And with this, I'm going to get into the more spicy part now, where I'm going to be telling you what actions we really took and how that had an impact on our business. So we do know from some hypotheses that we tested and also from the retention model that we actually have 2 weeks time to really engage our users. So this means for us that a user who has week 2 retention rate is also more likely to have a month 2 retention rate if that user performs certain actions within those first 2 weeks. So this is why this time frame of 2 weeks is set for us, and we tested that out before. And what was really important for us in the very beginning was understanding the actual user flow within the first 2 weeks and the timings when users are actually interacting with certain features as an addition to our proxy metric. So we already know that a user should be doing 2 workouts or more in their first 2 weeks, but what's actually the timing of interaction, what's the first feature they're looking at, what's the second one, so on and so forth. So this is another analysis that we did together with our favorite data scientist on top of the retention model, so that we know, for example, which type of workouts our users like the most and what they're starting and finishing. But also we do have social features in our app. So we also looked into if they're interacting with the social features, so for example, the friends feature or the news feed or so on, before they actually do a workout, or if this happens after their first workout, because this would ultimately inform how we optimize and what we look into and what type of content we suggest to the user in the very beginning when they're actually new with us in the app. So what we then also did as an addition is that for all of the different workout types that we have, so we're speaking here about standalone workouts, but also the workout creator, different types of training plans, so on and so forth. We also looked into, okay, what specific training plan has actually the highest month 2 retention rate. So for all of those buckets of users and all the different flows that were actually mapped out, we also looked into and pointing that also back towards month 2 retention to really figure out, okay, not just which kind of feature is the one that we should be pushing, but once we knew what type of feature it is, also which exact content should it be. And to make this now a bit more relatable to our app, so we figured out that actually training plans are a very great tool and feature for us to engage our users on the long run. And what we then had to do is figuring out what type of training plan should we actually suggest to our users so that they are more likely to stick with us on the long run, because for certain reasons, this training plan would just perfectly fit a certain user group, for example. And based on all of that information, we are on the one hand optimizing our product flow, as I already mentioned, but we're also optimizing our in-app messages that way. And of course, also everything that we have in the app in terms of dynamic content. So meaning that here the content in the app would be coming from a content management system in the background. So we can basically set certain types of workouts or content in the app live by just the push of a button in our content management system. And then it will be publicly available for our users all around the globe. The second part that we did is deriving product-related A/B tests to suggest users the right content and the right features. You can see one of our mockups here on the right side. So based on the insights that we all gathered, and as I mentioned before, we were running this A/B test right after registration so that we would get the users exactly where we want to have them and where we know that it's also best for them to also really form a habit and get into sports and forming that routine of sports, as we would call it. And by doing so, we actually increased our training plan started by more than 180%. So this was one of our very successful A/B tests, and that's all derived from our retention model and the insights on how we actually work in terms of retention rate optimization, purely derived by one of our squads, and they are fully owning this. On top of that, we also look at it, of course, not just from a product side, but also from a marketing side. And this is exactly where we, the product marketing team, or growth squad as we're called, are coming in. And David, our UA manager, actually did a really, really amazing job here. So what we did is testing new UA objectives on insights from the retention model. So what we are tracking with Adjust, which most probably all of you are familiar with, they are our MMP, and they make it very easy to set up custom in-app events. And we can actually funnel those custom in-app events back to Facebook, Google, whomever. And the algorithms of the ad networks can then really optimize for those events. And we were always focusing on getting users to do their first activity from a UA perspective, because it is already a quality metric for us, but it's still very high up in the funnel. So it won't take much time that the algorithm actually gets feedback from our MMP. And that's why we always went for this custom event. However, we shifted now from activity free finished 1 to activity free finished 2. So meaning the second activity that the user finishes, because of the insights from the retention model. And what we're seeing now is actually really, really great results. We reduced our CPI by more than 20%. We reduced our CPA and our cost per retained user by more than 30%. So although that metric is further down the funnel, it still really pays off for us that we made that step and that we were testing a lot. And we're even now thinking that it might make sense to optimize for activity free finished 3. And this is what we're currently testing. So we do have a few very preliminary insights, so take them with a grain of salt, but there are some markets where it seems to be possible to also go for that metric, but we also have found already 1 or 2 markets where activity free finished 3 is just not the right one anymore, so where our costs are actually rising and not getting lower anymore. In addition to what we're doing on the paid UA side, we're also optimizing our store listings through store listing experiments, especially on Google Play, to promote exactly the features that are proven to lead to a better long-term retention for us. So what we're doing is we're adapting the short and the full description so that we really promote the features that we know are liked by our users to our new users. And we also do a lot of experiments with our screenshots. So we're really telling our users about the main features, promoting the training plans that our existing users like the most, and where we know once they start this training plan, they actually have the higher month-to retention rate in the end. And by doing so, we're not just increasing our retention rates, actually, we also increased our store conversion rate by up to 25% in the different markets. And that's actually pretty great results for us, because everyone who's ever worked in ASO will know how hard it can be to improve that store conversion rate. Of course, we're also working on this topic from a CRM perspective. And here, Anja did a really great job when it comes to the CRM messaging journey. So she totally reworked our onboarding messaging journey based on the insights from the retention model. So before, our onboarding messaging journey was spanning over the first 7 days, just because we thought, like the first week is the most important one. No, we know now that it's actually the first 2 weeks. So we were really looking at the first 2 weeks and figuring out when are the days when our users are most likely to do a workout. We also looked into our existing user base, how long it takes them on average to perform their first workout and their second workout. And we then picked exactly those days after the registration to really send them different push notifications. So at the moment, all our messages in the onboarding user journey are focusing on getting to do our users 2 workouts or more in their first 2 weeks. And we're not just doing so by promoting different types of workout content, but we're also supporting them with blog articles that tell them about certain barriers they might be experiencing before starting their first workout, or just some tips and tricks on how to get started and so on, so that we really lower all of the entry barriers as much as we can and give them all the information so it's easier for them to start their first workout. And by doing so, we actually increased our conversion rate on the CRM messages by more than 170%. And you can also see on the right-hand side of the slide one of the examples of a push notification in our current onboarding messaging journey. And with the last point here on this slide, I'm actually going to circle back to what I was talking about before when I introduced to you the adjacent users theory. And for us, we know at the moment that a decent percentage of our users is still not successful. And this is what we don't like and what we want to change. So we want to make as many users successful in our app as possible. And while the retention model shows us that ideal path, it's on us now to figure out why the users are dropping. And this is an answer that data that we gather cannot give us. So what we are doing at the moment is we're extending our onboarding messaging journey by one more message in the very end. And that one is for the unsuccessful users. So if everything we did from a product side, from a UA side, from a CRM side, like everyone involved is not working, and after 14 days, a user did not manage to get to the successful state that we defined, then we're going to be sending them a survey, and we're going to be asking them for feedback. And this is not a one-time send out. This is part of our messaging journey, so that we actually ongoingly collect feedback from our users, and then we can then improve based on this. So our plan is that with this survey, we identify the barriers, then we can prioritize them, we can fix them, and then we will actually make the whole experience for new users better, because they're not experiencing those challenges anymore that current users are seeing. Plus, it also gives us a big opportunity for retargeting. So we can then really tell our users, hey, we listened to what you said, we heard you, we fixed it, now it's there. Don't you want to give our app another try? And with that, I'm already coming to the end of the presentation now, and I'm going to be finishing by sharing with you some of the main takeaways from this presentation, and also what we learned over the past few months. So first of all, what I can totally recommend to you is make your top-level company goals more tangible for teams by introducing different layers of metrics. For us, those layers are company goals, driver metrics, and proxy metrics. For you, it might be called something different, but in the end, what I can guarantee you is you will be stunned by the results the teams are actually delivering very autonomously by owning a metric that they can really fully own, fully understand, and drive themselves. The second point that I wanted to share with you is taking retention rate optimization step by step. This is also something we had to learn, because there's always a new opportunity. There's always the next thing that is just waiting around the corner. But for us, it really paid off that we are taking the time and optimizing first on short-term retention, now moving on to mid-term retention, and not just moving on once we optimize the ideal path, but also when we know why our users are struggling, what we can do to help them to improve, because there is at a certain point, like retention rate optimization, like the curves kind of flattening out. But if you then collect the qualitative feedback from users, there's still an opportunity to further grow. And this is also exactly what Instagram did with the adjacent user theory. So there's still a huge growth potential. And for that reason, I would highly recommend you to wait a bit, like take the time, collect the feedback from users, because there might still be a huge opportunity to grow where you are at the moment and what you're already working on, instead of moving ahead too fast. And the last one is kind of a last but not least, and might not be totally new to all of you, but it's prioritizing based on quality and not on quantity. And this is something that actually helped us a lot, because when it comes to retention rate optimization, in the beginning, it is always about delivering quality to the users, and the quantitative increase in users will take a while until it shows up. So first of all, for us, it's always that the quality metric is improving, meaning that, for example, week 1 retention is improving or month 2 retention is improving, but we don't see it in the same month on our monthly active users. And here I can only give you the advice, like, let it be, like, take the time, it will come, and it will have an impact on also the growth metrics and the more like high level numbers like MAUs, for example. Because in the end, like, if the quality metric is good, the quantitative metrics will anyways follow. Maybe not in the same month, maybe not in the next month, but it will do so. It always did so for us. And yeah, this is basically how we are doing retention rate optimization here at Runtastic. And with that, I'm already at the end of the presentation. And thank you all so much for listening in. I think we do have some time for questions now, Casey, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, and I've asked about questions. I don't currently see any. If anyone does have a question, please feel free to drop it in the Q&A. Anja, how can people reach you, aside from once you leave this presentation? What's the best way?
I think the easiest will be via LinkedIn. So for everyone who wants to stay in touch, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and send along my way, like any questions that are popping up, happy to answer them also afterwards.
Awesome. Thank you. I don't see any Q&A still. So with that, I think I will let you hopefully get some sleep and enjoy your vacation. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.